I have a secret crush on my professor, and he found out. I sat impatiently tapping my foot as I waited for the next period to start. The moment Professor Hall entered the classroom, my heart felt like it might leap out of my chest. He was the kind of man who turned heads without effort, his intense green eyes sharp and discerning, drawing people in with a single glance. Dressed in a crisp gray suit, he stood tall and confident, an imposing figure who rarely smiled but carried an air of calm that commanded the room. "Earth to Caleb," my best friend Rowan interrupted, snapping me out of my thoughts. "Why are you staring at Professor Hall like that?" I stammered, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks as I scrambled for an excuse. Rowan's eyes lit up as he caught on, a smirk spreading across his face. "Oh my, you're doing it again! Spill it or I'll start guessing," he teased. "Nothing. I don't know what you're talking about," I said, trying to look innocent. But deep down, I knew I was terrible at hiding this particular secret. I'd been harboring a quiet crush on Professor Hall since freshman year, careful to keep it under wraps, even from Rowan. But now, with that knowing look in his eyes, I realized there was no way out of this. I might just have to tell him the truth. A few hours later, I hurried down the corridor after my classes, hoping to dodge Rowan. If he cornered me now, I knew he'd press me to spill my secret, and I wasn't ready to see his reaction, or worse, his judgment. But just as I turned a corner, a hand shot out, pulling me aside. "Caleb, you can't escape me," Rowan said with a triumphant smirk. I sighed, feigning annoyance. "What do you want, Rowan? I really don't have time for this." "Come on, Caleb," he said, pouting in that infuriatingly charming way. "I'm your best friend. How can you hide something like this from me?" He was right. Rowan had always been there for me, never judging, never betraying. I knew he was the one person I could trust with his secret. "All right, fine," I said, lowering my voice. "But you can't tell a soul, promise?" He held up his hand in a mock salute. "Scout's honor." I took a deep breath, feeling my cheeks warm. I've had a crush on Professor Hall since freshman year." "Wow," Rowan said, his eyes wide with a mix of surprise and amusement. "I kind of suspected, but I never imagined it went back that far. You hit it well." "Yeah, I tried to. Sorry, I didn't know how to tell you. I thought you might judge me," I admitted, feeling a little foolish. Rowan's expression softened, though a hint of hurt flickered in his eyes. "How could you think that?" He paused, and then his usual smirk returned. "Professor Hall, huh?" He grinned. "Can't deny he has a certain aura, and yeah, he's definitely hot." I felt my face flush even more as I stared at my shoes, unable to meet his gaze. Just as I opened my mouth to respond, a sudden thud echoed around the corner. Both of us froze, glancing at each other before peeking around the edge of the wall to see what, or who, it was. "Didn't he look like Professor Hall?" Rowan whispered, his voice barely above a murmur. "Yeah, he did," I replied, feeling my stomach twisted with panic. If he had actually heard me, I'd be in serious trouble. I glanced at Rowan, hoping for reassurance. "Relax, there's no way he heard us," Rowan said, giving me a comforting pat on the shoulder. "If he did, he would have confronted us by now." "But what if he's planning to report me, or something worse?" I muttered anxiously. The thought of Professor Hall knowing about my crush made my cheeks burn with embarrassment. But I couldn't risk any misunderstandings. "No, I can't take the chance. I need to apologize." Ignoring Rowan's voice calling me back, I broke into a run, making my way toward Professor Hall's office. Every step felt heavier than the last, but I knew I had to explain myself, even if it meant facing my fears head-on. 30 minutes later. Though I'd marched all the way here with the resolve to tell Professor Hall the truth, the courage I thought I had was nowhere to be found. I'd been pacing outside his office for what felt like ages, debating whether to turn back. But when I glanced at my watch and saw it was nearly time for him to leave, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. Ignoring the issue would only make things worse. With a deep, steadying breath, I raised my hand and knocked on the door. "Come in," came his calm, confident voice from inside. I stepped inside, my legs feeling unsteady as I struggled to meet his gaze. Professor Hall looked up, his expression unreadable, but his tone clipped. I felt my pulse quicken, but I was determined to get through this, no matter how nervous I felt. "What is it? Speak quickly, I'm busy," he said, sounding impatient. I wanted to apologize," I stammered, feeling my cheeks heat up. "For what?" he asked, arching a brow. I took a shaky breath, then blurted out, "I'm sorry, I know it's wrong, but I've had feelings for you since freshman year and I couldn't help it. Please don't report me or anything." He watched me in silence, then with a slight sigh replied coldly, Is that all? I already heard. I don't want to hear any more about it. Leave. The dismissal hit like a punch to the gut. His face was unreadable, his tone indifferent, as though I just confessed to something as trivial as being late to class. Feeling my face flush with embarrassment, I mumbled an apology, turned on my heel, and walked out, every step heavy with regret. I prepared myself for him to be upset, maybe even furious, but this cold dismissal stung far worse than anything I'd anticipated. The indifference in his voice, the way he barely even looked at me, made me feel small, like my feelings didn't matter, like I didn't matter. I'd been harboring this crush for years, carrying the weight of it in silence, and now it all felt meaningless. Next day, I walked into the classroom feeling as disheveled as I looked. My eyes were heavy, and every step felt like it took extra effort. I spent the entire night wrestling with the sting of Professor Hall's cold dismissal, maybe even rejection, and I couldn't shake the hurt. Deep down, I knew there was never any real possibility between us, yet it didn't make it hurt any less. As I spotted Rowan waving at me from across the room, my heart sank even further. How could I face him now? I didn't feel like explaining anything or repeating the embarrassment I'd endured. All I wanted was to get through the day unnoticed, though I knew Rowan would never let it go that easily. "Hey buddy, you disappeared quickly yesterday. What happened?" Rowan asked, draping an arm over my shoulder. "Nothing. Everything went fine," I lied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Really?" he said, giving me a skeptical look. "Then why do you look like you were hit by a truck? Want me to tell him off for you?" I couldn't help but smile. "You do that for me?" "Of course, you're my best friend," he said, squeezing my shoulder. Hearing that warmed my heart. I'd always known we were close, but I hadn't realized how much Rowan really cared. Taking a deep breath, I finally admitted, "He just dismissed me, really coldly." "That's awful. I'm sorry," Rowan sighed, giving me a sympathetic look before continuing. "But maybe it was the best thing he could do. Saying anything else might have just complicated things for both of you." "I guess you're right," I nodded, trying to let his words sink in. Maybe this was for the best. A little later, Professor Hall entered the room, and the familiar wave of panic surged through me. After yesterday, I had no idea how I'd managed to sit through his class, let alone look him in the eye. If only I could disappear. I tried desperately to focus on the lecture, but my mind kept drifting back to his cold words. Caleb Jones," his voice cut through my thoughts, snapping me back to the present. My heart leapt as I looked up and realized he was calling my name. "Answer the question," he prompted, waiting expectantly. I stammered, trying to pull my mind together. But it was like trying to think through fog. Why was he even calling on me? Did he have to single me out today of all days? My eyes dropped to the floor as I struggled to form a response, but I had nothing. After a pause, he sighed and told me to sit down. The class continued, but my face burned with embarrassment. I could feel a dozen eyes on me, and all I wanted was for the ground to swallow me whole. This had to be the worst day ever. 2 days later. Since that day, the sting of embarrassment had slowly faded. I'd even managed to attend Professor Hall's classes without panicking. But as I walked down the corridor, lost in my thoughts, a familiar voice called out, stopping me in my tracks. "Caleb, come to my office." It was Professor Hall. My heart raced as I turned to face him. Why was he asking for me now? Was he planning to suspend me after all? Swallowing my nerves, I followed him to his office, each step feeling heavier than the last. Once inside, I braced myself, hoping for the best but fearing the worst. "Caleb, here are the assignments for the month. Please take them to your class and distribute them," Professor Hall said, handing me a neat stack of papers. Is that all?" I stammered, confused. He had never singled me out for anything before. Besides, professors usually brought the assignments themselves. "Yes," he replied calmly, though he raised an eyebrow. "Unless there's something else you'd like to discuss." "No, Professor," I answered quickly, clutching the stack and hurrying out of his office. As I walked back to class, my mind was racing. Why had he called on me of all people? After my confession, I'd expected him to keep his distance, maybe even avoid me, but here he was, calmly involving me in small tasks as if nothing had happened. Next day. On my way to Professor Hall's office again, I couldn't help but wonder why he kept calling me in. Avoiding him seemed impossible at this point. I took a steadying breath and knocked, stepping inside when he called me in. "You asked for me, Professor Hall?" "Yes, I wanted to talk to you," he replied, his tone serious. "About what?" I asked, confused. "Your studies," he said, watching me closely. "How are they going? Are you able to keep up with my lectures? Yes, of course, everything's going well, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Good, he nodded. Just remember, if you need help, you can come to me. Okay, thanks, I mumbled, barely meeting his gaze before slipping out of the room as quickly as I could. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was paying a little too much attention, and it left me more unsettled than ever. I shook my head, trying to clear the confusion swirling inside me. The whole situation was becoming a tangled mess, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make sense of it. 3 days later. Caleb, where are you? Lost again? Rowan yelled, snapping me back to reality. Stop, I protested, rubbing my ear. I was just thinking about something. Don't tell me you were thinking about your hot professor again, Rowan rolled his eyes dramatically. Shh, keep your voice down, I whispered, glancing around nervously. I'll be in trouble if someone else hears. Fine, but why are you thinking about him again? I thought you were over that whole thing, Rowan said, sounding genuinely curious. Not exactly. For some reason, he keeps calling on me for random things, I sighed, frustrated. Rowan's face lit up with a smirk. Maybe he likes you back too. Don't joke like that, I muttered, feeling a blush creeping up. That could never happen. Well, I don't see any other reason he'd be interested in you, Rowan wagged his eyebrows, clearly enjoying himself while I tried to ignore the hope fluttering in the back of my mind. Could Rowan be right? No, that didn't make any sense. Professor Hall had already shut down the topic in the most dismissive way possible, and realistically, why would he risk his career over a student? The very idea seemed ridiculous. There had to be some other reason for his sudden attention. It was probably just his way of making sure I didn't fall behind after all that awkwardness. 1 hour later. I was on my way back to class when I spotted Professor Hall just ahead. I froze, my instinct telling me to turn around and avoid yet another awkward encounter. But it was too late. Here I was. Good afternoon, Professor Hall, I greeted him, trying to keep my voice steady. Oh, hello, Caleb. Good to see you again, he smiled, his usually reserved expression softening. I blinked in surprise. Professor Hall wasn't known for being warm. Certainly not with his students. Why was he suddenly being so nice? I should go. I'll be late for class, I mumbled, trying to make a quick escape. Oh, wait, he held up a hand, stopping me in my tracks. Before you go, could you come by my office after classes? I want to discuss your assignment. My stomach flipped. Since when did he start calling students in for casual assignment discussions? Professor Hall wasn't exactly the type to offer extra help unprompted, especially not to me. I could feel my resolve wavering. Why did it have to be me of all people, when I was trying so hard to put this behind me? Is that necessary? I asked, forcing a casual tone. I mean, I worked hard on it, so I doubt there are any major issues. Professor Hall's expression softened. Yes, I'm aware. You're one of my best students, Caleb, which is exactly why I wanted to discuss your studies with you. But the way he said it felt off, like there was more he wasn't saying. All right, I replied with a sigh. I'll be there. There was no way out of this, and something told me it wasn't just about the assignment. A few hours later. The days passed in a blur. I couldn't focus on my classes, my mind consumed by Professor Hall's strange request. Finally, I found myself standing nervously outside his office, taking a deep breath. I knocked. Come in, he called. I entered to find him reading at his desk, a brief smile crossing his face. Thank you for coming, Caleb, he said, gesturing for me to sit. I took a seat, gripping my bag tightly. You wanted to discuss my assignment? I asked casually. Yes, but I noticed you seemed distracted in class. Is everything all right? His tone was unexpectedly concerned. I stared at him in shock. Isn't it obvious? I don't understand what you mean, he replied, avoiding my gaze. Why are you doing this, Professor Hall? Doing what? He feigned innocence. I couldn't hold back my frustration. You're messing with me because I like you. That's not true, he stammered, wide-eyed. Really? If you think you can hold my secret against me, I'll report it to the dean. I stormed toward the door. Wait, Caleb, he caught my hand. I never meant to harm you. Just, please, listen. Surprised, I hesitated but returned to my seat. All right, but it better be good. I was furious when I heard you confess your feelings, he said, looking vulnerable. But then I realized I wanted to be close to you. I think I feel the same way about you. Are you serious? I stammered, shock and hope mingling. It's true. I'm sorry if I hurt you. I didn't realize until now. Then we can be together? His expression hardened. Caleb, I told you this so you'd stay away from me. Do you understand my position? Why? We could keep it a secret. I looked at him desperately. Damn it, Caleb, I'm your professor, he yelled, crushing my hope. Do you want me to stay away? I asked, my voice wavering. Yes, that would be best for both of us, he murmured, avoiding my gaze. I nodded, turning to leave, the ache in my chest deepening. Caleb, please don't be upset, he called softly. It's complicated. It could hurt us both. But I couldn't look back. Ignoring his words, I walked away as fast as I could, tears spilling down my cheeks, the finality of his rejection stinging more than I'd ever imagined. A week later. I hadn't recovered from the shock of his rejection even after he admitted his feelings. Around Rowan, I acted confident, but he sensed something was off. Eventually, I knew I'd have to tell him. Attending Professor Hall's classes became unbearable, so I avoided them at first. Realizing how it affected my grades, I forced myself to return, determined to push through. I kept my distance and he never spoke to me again. Though it stung initially, I slowly began to care less. Earth to Caleb, Rowan said, waving his hand in front of my face. I blinked surprised, then smiled at him. What do you want? Just for you to be honest with me. You think I haven't noticed those sad faces you've been making, he said, giving me a reproachful look. I chuckled softly. I can never hide anything from you, can I? So, what is it? Don't tell me it's Professor Hall again, Rowan said, exasperation clear in his voice. Kinda, I admitted, looking down. He confessed to me, but then he turned around and rejected me, saying nothing could happen between us because of the complicated situation. That's bullshit, Rowan nearly shouted. He just lied to you. I heard from someone that he's seeing someone from senior year, his face twisted in a scowl. What? I stared at him in shock. That's not possible. There's no way he would play with my feelings like this. His confession had felt so genuine. Could he really do this? I had to confront him. I couldn't just let it go. I knocked on his office door, anxiety prickling through me as I waited. Moments later, a boy from the senior year, someone I knew was popular, walked out, flashing me a small wave before heading down the hallway. My heart sank as the realization settled in, yet a wave of anger bubbled up to meet it. When Professor Hall's voice finally came in, I steadied myself, trying to mask my emotion. This time, I wasn't just hurt. I wanted answers. Come in, he called out. I strode inside, barely containing my anger, and demanded, Who was that? Who do you mean? He asked, looking genuinely confused. So he was going to keep up the innocent act. The guy who just left. I thought you didn't date your students, I shot back, my tone sharp. His expression darkened immediately. Watch it, Caleb. You don't know what you're accusing me of. Oh, really? I replied, sarcasm dripping from my words. Because I've heard plenty of rumors about you seeing someone from the senior class. He took a steadying breath, his gaze serious. You heard wrong. Nothing is going on like that. Nothing's like that? I scoffed, crossing my arms. Then what was he doing here? Professor Hall let out a long sigh, pinching the bridge of his nose. Caleb, rumors are just that. Rumors. I have a reputation to uphold, and he came by for guidance. Nothing more. You need to trust me. Is that all you care about, your reputation? I felt the sting of tears welling up. He paused, his expression softening. Yes, I do, he admitted, his tone steady but distant. Then, catching the look on my face, he added quietly, But Caleb, I had never meant to hurt you. No, you never do, but somehow I'm always the one who ends up hurt, I swallowed, fighting back the tears. You know what? You and your precious reputation can be together forever. I don't care about you anymore. Without waiting for his response, I spun around and stormed toward the door. Caleb, wait, please, he called, but his voice felt miles away. But I was determined not to hear another word from him. He had hurt me enough already, and I'd be a fool to let him hurt me anymore. Ignoring his pleas, I kept walking, each step harder than the last, but my resolve only grew. Letting go was painful, yet somehow I knew this was the only way to protect myself from the heartbreak he'd left me with. Next morning, I was walking down the hallway, still caught up in yesterday's argument, when I accidentally bumped into someone. Rubbing my head, I mumbled an apology, but when I looked up, I froze. It was Professor Hall. Caleb, I need to talk to you, he said, his gaze fixed on me, intent and unwavering. There's nothing to talk about, I replied, brushing past him. He reached out, his hand closing gently around mine. Please, Caleb, he pleaded, glancing around as if worried someone might see us. I hesitated, taking in his expression, one of genuine regret, maybe even pain. Against my better judgment, I sighed. Maybe giving him one last chance couldn't hurt. I nodded, and soon we were sitting in his office, the silence between us thick with tension. "So, what is it?" I asked, wanting to get this conversation over with. He ran a hand through his unkempt hair, his face looking weary. "I was up all night thinking about you," he admitted quietly. I glanced at the dark circles under his eyes. He looked rough, like someone who had truly spent the night wrestling with his thoughts. "Why though? I thought you didn't care about me." "That's not true, Caleb. I care. A lot. That's the problem." He let out a dry, sad chuckle. His usual calm, confident demeanor had faded, replaced by a vulnerability I'd never seen before. I looked at him, startled, feeling my frustration waver. "I don't know what to say. If you care so much, why do you keep fighting it?" I asked, my voice serious. He looked down, gathering his thoughts before replying. "It's not about my reputation, Caleb. I worry that you'll get hurt." I gave him a sad smile. "You don't need to worry about that. You've already hurt me more than anything else could." He swallowed, his expression heavy with guilt. "I'm sorry," he murmured, looking down at his hands. For a moment neither of us spoke, the silence stretching as we both absorbed the weight of what had been said. I sighed, trying to find the right words. "Can't we give us one chance?" I looked at him with hope, willing him to see my sincerity. "Caleb, we have such a huge age gap. Imagine what everyone would say," he replied, concern etched on his face. "Why do you care so much about what other people think? Let them say what they want. I don't care," I insisted, feeling a surge of determination. He chuckled softly, a hint of admiration in his eyes. "I didn't know you were so brave." "I just really like you," I said, my voice steady as I met his gaze. For a long moment, he stared at me, his expression softening. Then he sighed, the tension easing from his shoulders. "All right, if you're sure, then would you like to give this fool a chance?" He smiled at me expectantly. I felt a rush of excitement at his words, but hesitation crept in. I wanted this more than anything, yet I couldn't shake the uncertainty. Could I trust him? What if he backed out later? My heart fluttered with joy, but my mind was a chaotic whirlwind of doubts. "I'm sorry, Professor Hall, but I can't say yes right now. I need to think about this," I replied, my heart heavy with uncertainty. He sighed, a mix of resignation and understanding in his expression. "I deserve this. I've already hurt you a lot. Why would you say yes to me now? Take your time to decide." His tone shifted slightly as he added, "But call me Daniel from now on." A smile broke through my apprehension and I nodded. "Okay, Daniel." As I took my leave, I felt the weight of the moment linger in the air. I needed some time away from him to make a decision, to sort through my feelings. I knew exactly what would help me right now. "Rowan," I called out, knowing he could help me sort through my thoughts. "What is it, bud? In trouble again?" he teased. "Actually, yes, I need your help." I took a deep breath and explained everything. "Do you still like him?" Rowan asked seriously. "Yes, but I'm afraid he's going to break my heart," I admitted. "You don't need to worry about that," he said with a chuckle. "We could break his legs if he does." I laughed. "You're not hurting Daniel." "Oh, so you're on a first-name basis? It's already gone that far," he teased. "It's nothing like that," I protested, blushing. "Please be serious. What should I do?" He smiled knowingly. "You just want to know if saying yes is the right choice." I looked down, realizing he was right. "You're right. Don't overthink it. Go with your heart and say yes. Nothing will go wrong," he encouraged. I felt a wave of determination. Nothing could stop me from saying yes to Daniel now. A few hours later, after my classes ended, I raced to Daniel's office, my heart pounding with excitement and anticipation. I couldn't wait any longer to say yes to him. This was finally happening. Something I had hoped for so long was within reach. "Daniel," I shouted as I barged into his office, unable to contain my enthusiasm. "Be careful, Caleb. Someone could have hurt you," he said, glancing outside nervously. I took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of guilt and exhilaration. "I'm sorry," I confessed, then continued. "I just had something really important to say." He looked at me with genuine curiosity, his expression softening. "What is it?" "It's a yes, Daniel," I declared, my voice steady and bright. "I don't want to spend another moment away from you." My smile lit up the room, and I could see his surprise transforming into a hopeful grin. Daniel rushed across his office and pulled me into his arms, catching me off guard. I chuckled in surprise, my heart racing. "Thank you, Caleb. I won't let you regret this," he said earnestly, his voice warm against my ear. "I know," I replied, returning his embrace. It felt so right being wrapped up in his arms. But we can't tell anyone now. It would put both of us in jeopardy, he explained, pulling back to look into my eyes. I understand, I assured him. Only my best friend knows, and he won't tell a soul. I swear I won't mention this to anyone else. It would get me in trouble too. Thanks, Caleb. I can't tell you how relieved I am to hear that. He sighed, his expression softening. I never knew being with you would make me this happy. I chuckled softly, feeling a warmth spread through me. Of course, I have that aura, I winked playfully, the tension in the room dissolving as laughter filled the space between us. Daniel pressed his lips to mine, igniting an exhilarating thrill within me. The kiss felt electrifying, unlike anything I had ever experienced before. My heart raced with happiness, and I wished that this moment could last forever. Being with Daniel felt so right, so perfect, and I couldn't help but imagine all the moments we would share throughout my college years. The future suddenly felt bright and full of possibilities, and I couldn't wait to explore it all with him by my side. Conclusion. Daniel and I continued our relationship even after graduation. Although we had to keep it a secret during college, we were no longer needed to worry about hiding our love once we moved in together. I discovered that Daniel was not just the calm and confident professor I had known. He also possessed a soft and vulnerable side that only a few got to see. Being with him helped me gain confidence as I navigated the challenges of the real world. I learned that Daniel's concerns about our age gap were unfounded. We complemented each other perfectly. Together we created a beautiful life filled with love, support, and understanding, proving that the bond we shared was stronger than any societal expectations. Rowan remained my best friend long after college, and I knew I was incredibly fortunate to have someone like him in my life. No one else could match his fun-loving spirit and caring nature. He not only supported my relationship with Daniel wholeheartedly, but also cheered us on every step of the way. Watching him grow and thrive in his own love life was a joy. I cherished the moments we shared, knowing that our friendship was a rare and precious gift. One evening on our balcony, Daniel surprised me by saying, I want to marry you, Caleb. Without hesitation, I said yes. From that moment, we began planning our future, discussing our dream wedding and envisioning the life we wanted to build together. Our love had transformed from a secret romance into a strong partnership, and together, we were ready to face any challenges that lay ahead, hand in hand. The end. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.